Recalling again what was said by former President Jimmy Carter, quote, I think an overwhelming portion of the intensely demonstrated animosity toward President Barack Obama is based on the fact he is a black man. President Carter placed that claim in context of the nation's long historical struggle with racism and his own personal experience, his own witness. So in our third story in the countdown, the acrid, cutting context. The problem with claiming that Congressman Joe Wilson's outburst might have been racially tinged is not that it's such a stretch, but rather that it fuels the false equivalency. If you say any criticism of Obama is racial, your words will be twisted into all criticism of Obama is racial. And if deniers can then prove one instance isn't racial, they will exaggerate that lone proof into proof that all criticism isn't racial. Was this poster of the president at a tea party in Brighton, Michigan, not racist? The kind of poster that showed up at various town hall meetings, with the 9/12 protests serving as a road rage poster convention. The most blatant examples of racism were there, along with the heavily coded ones. The president as the devil, the president as the blood-sucking alien, the president as undocumented worker, the president as Hitler. And if you think that allusions to violence are not racially motivated, you may soon reconsider. The relationship between hate on the ground and hate from the airwaves of right-wing bloviators is complicated, a symbiotic, increasingly dangerous one-upsmanship. But when Rush Limbaugh says, quote, in Obama's America, the white kids now get to beat up the black kids with the black kids cheering. White kids now get beat up with the black kids cheering, basing it on a school bus incident, which police determined was not over race, but over an argument over who got to sit where. That alteration is definitionally unadulterated racism. More on Limbaugh in a moment. But that same story about a fight on a school bus was prominently played on Matt Drudge's website, surrounded by anti-Obama headlines. Context is key. But context is hardly necessary to reveal the obvious. When the president's environmental advisor, Van Jones, resigned, it was in part because this man stirred up accusations of Mr. Jones's otherness. Of course, Glenn Beck had been, as he still is, losing advertisers because of efforts by the organization Mr. Jones co-founded, Color of Change. Advertisers objecting to Mr. Beck having said he thought Obama is, quote, a guy who has a deep-seated hatred for white people or the white culture. This guy is, I believe, a racist. Mr. Limbaugh picked up where Beck left off, pointing out that Van Jones is Obama, just as Obama is William Ayers, which is a racist double dip. Black president is the same as other troublesome black men. Black president is dangerous, just like a domestic terrorist. So when Bill O'Reilly tops his show just last night with yet another segment on Acorn, he continues in the tradition of right-wing pundits and politicians who have taken isolated cases of abuse to portray Acorn as a collection of criminally minded African Americans, with the president as Acorn's poster child. Bringing us back to Mr. Limbaugh, whose consistent mission has been to denigrate Obama the candidate, Obama the president, in overtly racist terms, calling him African American and playing a song, Barack the Magic Negro, during the presidential campaign. Whatever its origins, the song is, on its face, racist. Late in that same campaign, a local McCain campaign volunteer falsely claimed that she had been robbed and pinned to the ground by a black man, 6'4", with a knife, who then scratched the letter B into her face. She did it to herself, backwards in the mirror. A campaign in which Obama as monkey, brandished by a McCain supporter, was a mere footnote to the far more dangerous theme. Then candidate Sarah Palin taking up the William Ayers story and turning it into this.
Our opponent is someone who sees America as imperfect enough to pal around with terrorists who targeted their own country.
And while we literally do not have the time here to recount all the fear-driven nonsense stirred up during that campaign, it easily led to instances like this one.
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am.
So when calls to kill him rang out at some GOP rally, who could legitimately claim that it had to be isolated from that context? Meantime, rumors about the other side and its racism never proved true but spread, like the false accusation that Michelle Obama had used the word whitey. Thus, the pain this New Yorker cover stirred was back because it was so accurately and achingly, if satirically, representational of much of what was going on back then. And then after the election, the White House watermelon picture emailed by the mayor of Los Alamitos and the New York Post dead monkey cartoon, both of a piece, Then there were the underreported incidents immediately following the election of the first African-American president in Durham, North Carolina. Police officers investigated for making racial slurs on their MySpace pages. Dozens of incidents of alleged hate crimes by ordinary citizens across the country. At a Maine convenience store, a betting pool on when Obama might be assassinated. At North Carolina State University, the spray painting of "Kill That Racist Expletive" deleted. It is sickening, but it is just a sampling, and it shares the same obvious undercurrent, just as the brandishing of the Confederate flag during the campaign is mirrored by the Confederate flag at the recent 9/12 protests, just as the South shall rise again sentiment associated with states' rights finds its way to flirtations with secession, as in Texas with Rick Perry as governor. That ample and ugly context constantly supplemented by the most foul refreshers built for consumption, like Limbaugh wondering, quote, if Obama's brother is still in the hut, end quote. Set against that, are we to believe that the birther movement can be separated from racism? That the wild fear-mongering of the deathers does not play on racist fears of a black man's otherness and his stereotyped proclivity to violence? Thus, the first time a president in history was heckled in a joint session of Congress by a man who had maligned Strom Thurmond's mixed-race daughter, and yet Mr. Wilson's defenders wonder why anyone might think his outburst was even slightly racially motivated. And contemporaneously, they will still assert that Mr. Wilson's derision was an aberration, though they brought signs in its anticipation. The bronze, the Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann of Minnesota, the Emily Litella of the House. We just heard last week that the federal government, now under the Obama administration, is calling for a reordering of America's food supply. What's that going to mean? Now will the White House decide how many calories we consume or what types of food we consume? She's talking about the Food Safety Enhancement Act of 2009, which, quote, sets forth provisions governing the reorganization of Food and Drug Administration field laboratories and district offices so they can better inspect our food, especially the imported food. Sorry, Congresswoman Litella, no dessert czar will be coming to your house to not let you eat cake. Never mind. A runner-up from the University of I don't remember. It's Lonesome Rhodes with today's top lie on Fix News. This one is too good for me to do the silly voice.
Because I ratted out a self-avowed communist in the administration in Van Jones, the same organizations, the same politicians, the same progressive media that are ignoring or standing for Acorn now have called me Joseph McCarthy. They have such little regard for your intelligence that they don't think that you're going to figure out that Joseph McCarthy was a powerful senator surrounded by the trappings of power of the United States government, with the power of subpoena and the power of Congress. The guy who stood against that was alone, while everybody else wet their pants and cowered in fear. You'd think the members of the media might remember his name. It was Edward R. Murrow. And while I am nowhere near an Edward R. Murrow, never claimed to be, let me use the words of finally somebody else that stood up to the power and these senators and said, Senator, have you no shame?
Hey, Ed, you got the quote wrong. And the speaker wrong. It wasn't have you no shame, it was have you no sense of decency, sir. And it wasn't Murrow, it was Joseph Welch, the lawyer representing the Army during the Army McCarthy hearings. Hadn't thought of the McCarthy analogy, Lonesome. Let's take it for a test drive.
Because I ratted out a self-avowed communist in the administration.
Any man who has been given the honor of being promoted to general and who says, I will protect another general who protects communists is not fit to wear that uniform, General.
Okay. By the way, Glennie, get the blood pressure checked. Our winner, Congressman Joe Wilson. Yeah, him.
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally.
Wilson said the next day, quote, I'm for immigration, legal immigration. I've been an immigration attorney. The website TPM Muckraker is now tirelessly trying to vet Congressman Wilson's resume on that point. There's always the possibility that he was somehow involved in an immigration case, but no record of that has yet been found. He was a real estate attorney and a staff judge advocate in the South Carolina Army National Guard. But another lawyer from Wilson's home county says he's known him since 1985 and, quote, Joe's never been anything but a real estate attorney. A prominent immigration lawyer in South Carolina says he's been doing that for 21 years and he's never crossed legal paths with Mr. Wilson. And the American Immigration Immigration Lawyers Association says it has searched its database, and nobody from South Carolina named Joe Wilson, or using his real name, Addison Wilson, has ever been a member of its organization. So, Congressman Wilson, immigration lawyer, eh? You lie! Republican Congressman Joe Resume Patter Uli Wilson, today's worst person in the wrong way Wilson world.